What is love and how does it feel? And how can it help us lead more and more into living our truth? This is Let Her Be Heard. I'm Andrea Gullick and I'm joined with the beautiful Barb Gibson, and we are diving straight into this topic today. How are you, Barb?
I'm great, Andrea. How are you?
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Yeah. So this is a topic that is exceptionally close to both our hearts. Obviously, it's the whole love topic. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be really important. Well, I think it's an important topic to really tease this open about what love is, what it isn't, and what it can be. Because I do feel like this can get in the way of people living their truth. What's your take, Barb?
Yeah, it can. Because in my experience, Andrea, the definition of love, we use that word a lot, love, unconditional love, you must love. And sometimes that story around what is love is that love is really kind of soft and is very enticing in a way that it can be very attractive and enticing, but love can be very powerful too. And one of my things that I've learned with people is unconditional love is to call people up to who they were created to be and to do what they were created to do. And that doesn't always mean lining up with their stories, if that makes sense, because sometimes their stories are like, if I take my story, for example, of going back to my husband passing, of I'm a victim and I'm a widow and poor me. And I had to step out of that story. The people who wanted to speak that to me, they loved me. I know they were for me. But, there came a point when I was like, if I stay in this state, I don't know how to move forward, and it's not doing me any good. And that doesn't mean I didn't feel to heal. That doesn't mean I didn't deal with it. I ignored it. I faced it. And so that's what we mean by unconditional love. And so you talk about
and I think it's that one of the main points there is that when we get really, really honest and when we can really see what love feels like, it doesn't always feel nice. It doesn't always feel gentle, and maybe even at the start, it doesn't even feel loving. But it's about being able to recognize what the true intention of things are and where it's coming from. So in terms of being able to say, calling people in to be their true self, or even when we're being called into being, we're calling others in to be, to live in more of our truth, it can feel really uncomfortable. So I guess what we're really saying, I guess my point is, again, the same with my experience with this, is that I ended up with mental health after my third child. I had post-traumatic and postnatal, sorry. So it was not a great time in my life at all. But I had a beautiful midwife who was, she was a private midwife. We'd invested in her to have her take that journey with us. And, she gave me around 7 weeks of being a complete basket case and just crying all the time and feeling like my child never slept when she actually did, because our mind isn't the truth, our heart is. But my mind was on it was screaming so loud that I couldn't feel my heart. I couldn't feel the truth. And I rang one day really distraught, and she'd allowed me, because that's what we're really doing, isn't it? We're allowing. We're allowing people to stay in their story if we're not calling out the truth. And her thing was that's it. Stop crying. That's not helping. That's, you're not stopping this. You can feel your anxiety kick in, Andrea, and then you're doing nothing to actually try to diffuse it. You're just allowing it to get just bigger and bigger, like this massive snowball, and then you completely fall apart. And it was not soft. and it was not gentle. She was a very black and white lady, but it was the most loving thing that anybody could have done, because it turned it around. Because it allowed me to recognize where I was giving away my power to these thoughts and these untruths and things like that. And so, you know, I guess with those examples, Barb, what happens if the very thing that we say or have been taught to believe is unloving? Like, why would you do that to a woman who's got postnatal and is a basket case? Why would you call her out like that? That's not loving. What happens if it's the most loving thing we can do?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the power of recognizing what love feels like and breaking open the notion or the belief or the deception that love must feel good, and love must, like, for it to be love.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does. And I've got a lot of things going through my head as you talk. And so
Go.
you should write notes, but I don't. But part of that is, you know, one of my big beliefs is everything is working for my good. So me, myself, if I can think that, consciously think that with my thoughts, everything is working for my good. So whatever I'm hearing, how can this be for my good? So like you with your midwife, of, okay, if everything's for my good. And I heard you say, I didn't know this story, but I heard you say there was some mental health right then, and depression, all that. So maybe you can't do that. But if you can, grab a hold of that and know that everything is working for your good. So when someone brings something to your attention, no matter what their intent is, that you will hold on to that for yourself as a way to move you forward. The flip side of that is if you're a person who's giving that kind of unconditional love, of being the midwife, of like, I love you too much to let you stay in this place. Or you can be saying it from a point of criticism. How can you be so stupid to do that? There's a very different feel in that. You can even feel it when I say the words. And so I you know, part of our conversation, part of our reason for having this conversation today, Andrea, we talked about this a little bit before we started today's show, is that we have opened up a Facebook group, and we're creating a community, a loving community of all of us stepping into the powerful people, women, people that we are, and to living the most beautiful, blissful life of love, being loved, and loving others. And so how do we do that? And we are going to maybe call some things out sometimes that come from the deepest places in our heart. And I get choked up about this stuff because when I stepped into my own power and I realized that the stories that were in my head weren't helping me move forward, and I was the only one that could change those. When I did that, it changed my life. And that's what we're here to do, is walk alongside a community of people who are looking for that same thing. And I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. And Andrea, we haven't known each other that long. We talk about it every week. We haven't known each other, but I have met you and you are passionate about it. And so the people that listen to us and are attracted to us, I hope they feel love. And sometimes our words might be like, what do you mean? Just like what you said, like your midwife saying, stop crying. That's the best thing. And so
the best thing too, if I can just interject, sorry, is that she followed her words with actions. So she followed her words with, but I'm going to help show you how to help yourself right now.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between calling something out and walking away and leaving someone more shattered than when you turned up, and calling something out and staying to love them. And that is the other part, obviously, along with the community we're creating. Let her be heard is really about letting her be heard. So we have opened up the opportunity for our community to anonymously come to us, to be able to fill in a questionnaire and express what's happening for them in their life and what maybe they can't see, or what their way forward. And so in doing that, we want to be really, really explicit in saying, we are for you. Like, we are so for you and for your future and for you to live the best life you can. But sometimes there might be something that we say, or our perspective, or it doesn't feel that comfortable. But in that knowing that we are here, and even down to the simplest thing, and the reason why this feels like such a good topic, other than obviously letting our community know that we will always be for them, is that I have been a notorious people pleaser in my life, and I know that out in the world there are lots of what we classify people pleasers, people that want to please others, that don't want to ruffle feathers. And I think sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of the time, because you helped call this out for me, Barb, was that we don't speak our truth. We don't make our choices like based on what is true for us, because it looks like it's not loving or kind for them. And yet I literally just had this conversation with someone that I love deeply. Like, I admire this person so much. They are so level-headed, so grounded, so about relationships. But they have some people in their life that are really not connected. Like, they're not tuned into the relationship. And this person allows that because that's them. So there's this different, being able to differentiate between that we're trying to change a person and accepting who they are, but still being able to speak our truth around it. Because I think that's really important. Like, calling something out, Barb, and I know, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think you'll be on a similar path to me. Calling something out or speaking our truth about a situation is in no way expecting them to change.
Right. That's
not what this is.
It's all about me, about you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is not
being our story.
Look, when you said this or you did this, you need to stop doing that, because we don't have that control. We don't have that power. But in this situation, the way that the relationship was and the way that they interacted, or actually didn't interact, more so, that they were so tuned out in their own world that there was literally like no connection. And so it's kind of like, what's the point? And so my question was, so what gets in the way of you just lovingly explaining how that feels for you? And their response was, well, obviously their feelings, like, I don't want to hurt them. And my response was, what happens if it's the most loving thing that you could do?
Yeah.
Because what happens if, like, they have no, they don't realize, like, what happens if they're impacting a lot of other areas in their life, and they like, and it doesn't really matter about them, but can we be so true to ourselves? Can we love ourselves and know, like you were saying before, Barb, it can come from a place of truth and love, or it can come from a place of criticism.
Yeah.
But when we get so honest about that, that's the difference, right?
Yeah. So Andrea, as you talk to that person, so if we were talking to someone, I would want to stay very focused on that person. I love what you're saying about what if it's the most loving thing you can do for that person. But there's a reason that the other person wanted to be like, not upset them, a peacemaker, And that comes down to her own power of like, the question usually ends up is, if I upset them, will they still love me?
And that's the deeper level, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that we kind of stop on that, well, I don't want to upset them. But you know, that's exactly, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. But then, and the conversation ended, like we didn't have time, but that would be the next thing. Okay,
Yeah.
what's underneath that? And you're so right. It's like, but but then I've got to think about me, and what happens if they don't like me, or what happens if they are upset or think that I'm not a nice person, and then what's under that? And we know that as we peel those onion layers, it will always come back to, how much do I love me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when we are safe in that of, I actually really love who I am, and I'm really okay with who I am, and I'm really rock solid in my truth, then it helps to just start to disintegrate some of that fear. And we begin to realize that it's okay for me to say, I don't know about days on end without any conversation, because you're completely in doing, like, yeah, like, obviously don't want to go into the topic too much, but do you know what I mean? Like, when we can be okay in our own skin, Barb, and really being okay in our own skin is really just saying, I am enough and I love who I am, then those conversations, I think, are easier to have.
They are. And that's the whole thing of, whenever we're, I want to stop for a second and just let people know we're all about kindness. And of course, we care how people feel. What we are not about is letting people continue with their story that isn't true. And how you know a story isn't true for somebody is when there's a pain. The pain is always an indicator that you're resisting truth. And so we're all about kindness. We'll put a blanket over that. And where we really want to go, and people don't always want to go, and that's what all about Let Her Be Heard, is to go deeper. And what is this? What makes me want to be a people pleaser? That's more what we're talking about. We're not talking about kindness. We're talking about pleasing people. We're talking about not rocking the boat. We're talking about that feeling inside you, whether you're aware of it or not, that's like, if I do something they don't like, will they still love me? Am I enough? And that's the conversation that we're really talking about. And so I love it, because this is where you can change. This is where you start living a life of abundant joy. This is where adventure and I'm not talking about external anything, that I'm talking about this internal peace and contentment and gratitude for everything, and the ability to say everything's working for my good, no matter what my external circumstance looks like. And you can tell as I talk about that, I get excited and passionate about it.
Yeah, and I want to just backtrack to that "am I enough" thing, because that's been a pretty defining moment as well. As in, I think a lot of people are, am I enough to be loved? But another really important question is to ask ourselves, because we've had discussions, Barb, about how, focusing on the outside relationships and the inside relationships, and how that is all intertwining to create this joy and this peace and this love and stuff. We need both. Like, I am a firm believer, we need both. We need a very strong connection to who we are and fully trusting and loving who we are. But to really, the icing on the cake is then how that spreads a connection to other people.
Yeah.
And how we interact in relationships and friendships, and that enoughness. Am I enough if they aren't there? Like, do I love me enough to not enable people, to not enable myself, to not stay in situations, whether they are with external sources or with internal forces?
Yeah.
Am I enough to just be okay that, like, that's a really big thing for me, like, in terms of, because that's what we're afraid of, isn't it? That if we really speak our truth, even from a place of love, and say, this isn't okay for me, or this is how I feel, or this is what I want, or this is what I don't want, what happens if they walk away, or they come back at us, or can we be enough?
That's a huge question, Andrea. What happens if they don't? If we are left alone? And your question is right. Am I enough for me? Do I believe in
Yes.
me? Do I love me? And how do we do that? How do we learn to love ourselves? And how do you know if you do love yourself? And that's what, when we talked about feelings today, how does it feel? And the feeling will be one of peace. We're going to talk about peace a lot in this group. And the emotions are indicators of where you're at. And that, what's it look like to love yourself? And people ask me that, what does it look like to love yourself? And if you join my podcast now with the Love Lives Here podcast, and I talk about the voice of love, my connection to the voice of love. Some people call it God, universe, source, whatever. We're talking the same thing, but it's that, like, show me, how am I loved? How am I loved? And just start asking questions. And what that does for me, that is my method to finding peace. There might be other ways, but this is what I do. And many people, as I've drove taxi and stuff, hundreds of people have found this to work. To just ask questions and sit with yourself and hear the answer. And if you don't love yourself, when you hear something really good about yourself, the first thing you're going to do is judge it and go, oh, that's just me thinking that. But if you'll stop and not judge it, and just whatever it is, just go like, how does that feel? If all of a sudden you've never heard you're amazing and you hear you're amazing, and you start judging it by going, nobody's ever said I'm amazing. I've never done anything amazing. I don't do amazing. You start that conversation that starts. If you stop and go like, oh, what does it feel like to hear that I'm amazing? And when you hear stuff like that, you'll smile. And that's what I was kind of referring to earlier. We know a voice of condemnation. If you hear something that says, you're not worth anything, anything, any words, whatever, that to make you feel like you're not worth something, or you're not loved, or they feel like, oh, back up. That's not the voice we're talking to. Just move on from that. And just ask, what do you love about me, with curiosity, and just wonder of what you could hear. And it might be foreign to begin with, but it's love, and it's talking to you about you. And when you hear those things and you'll start believing it, it changes everything. And this is my story, but it's not just my story. It's the hundreds of people in my taxi who would hear the most amazing things. And we are here to kind of do what I used to do in my taxi. I don't know if I've really thought about that, Andrea, but this little group here is like, we create a space where we will support you to believe the things that you can't believe until you can believe them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. In terms of continuing to help you see, and that's like your gift, Barb. Like, there's no doubt in that you help people see what they don't believe in themselves. So this is different to, we can get external affirmation every day of the week if we try really hard, right? We can get that. The power lies in personal affirmation.
Absolutely.
And the first step for me, I think, is that we want that. You have to want to hear this stuff from yourself. You have to want to feel different in your life. You have to want to be committed to living out your best life. Yeah. And because it doesn't come. It is a commitment to loving ourselves at such a level that we are okay. So when you were talking before about peace and that feeling of peace,
Yeah.
I guess for me, making that more tangible for me, that understanding,
Okay.
is that part of my peace is when I can let go of the expectations and the outcomes.
Yes.
To me, that is what brings me back to a more centered place. And I haven't been good with that, Barb. Like, our audience are going to get to know us well enough to know that, you know, Barb Gibson's journey and Andrea Gullick's journey have been completely different, but they have the same message, right? So this is the thing. I'm not standing here going like I'm just in a place of peace all the time. It's work for me. I have to keep asking myself. I have to keep reminding myself. But that is the key to me. That in any situation, I want to let go of the expectation and the outcome of the result, because that's what interferes with my peace.
Yeah.
That's what takes me away from love.
And your statement about you have to want it, Andrea, I believe that desire is in every one of us. And your key to knowing if you want it, your indicator of do I want it is that there's pain. And we have a natural reaction to resist pain. And so we all want it. The thing is, will you do what it takes? Will you respond? Will you move into it? Will you, like you were talking, Andrea, like, we all have choices. And that's where the bravery, vulnerability comes in of like, will I step into this? And
because the thing is,
it's the desire.
Yeah, it's because it's not stepping in to stay there. It's stepping in to step through.
Yes.
See, I think some people are like, but if I get in there and I'm in that pain and I've really got to see stuff, I've really got to see my stories, and I've really got to understand that and accept that, oh man, like that's going to be a quagmire. I'm never going to get out of that. It's like, you got to go in to get through.
Yes.
You know,
that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And that we don't have to do this alone.
No.
The journey of knowing who we are, of really truly owning ourselves, that is a personal, intimate journey.
Yeah. If I can just really quickly, we've only got a couple minutes here, Andrea, but I was talking to someone this morning about it, and maybe this will wrap it up and help people feel it some. So I often say it's like you get on this iceberg, and you're on this small iceberg in this big body of water, and you've left where you are. This is the scary part. You've left where you are, and you're on this little iceberg, and you have an oar, and you haven't reached the other side yet. And this in-between stuff is vulnerable, and it messes with you, and it's not easy, and it's scary. And I can't get you there, but I can be right beside you. And that's what I'll be beside you. And I'll say like, okay, you can do it. Okay, paddle on this side, paddle on that side. I can't get you there. Only you can, but we'll walk beside you.
Yeah.
We'll help you get there. You're not alone. But friends, we promise you the journey it's a beautiful journey. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, but you can look back and see the beauty in it. That's my story. And I think it's yours, Andrea. The things we've gone through, things we've persevered, have been so worth it to get to the other shore. And when you get to the other shore, it's magic. And I don't stand here, just sit here speaking to you as a person who has it all figured out. But I tell you, I know how to get to my peace quickly. And it's because I've done it for so long. And now I'm being shown to come back and be beside you and take your hand. Although if you're on your iceberg, I can't necessarily take your hand,
Yeah.
But tell you, like, encourage you to go inside. What are you hearing now? What's your next step? And that is what this community is about. This is the desire of our heart, is to walk beside people and let's show up. Because when we change ourselves, for me, this is what I've always seen. When I change myself, it changes generations to come. It affects our homes, our family. It affects our workplace, which if you affect
it's the ripple, right?
Yes, it's the ripple. It affects their family. And what if we come into a world of unity instead of division, a world of that's compassionate instead of comparing and dividing? What if we can live in that? And, we're talking big when we say that. It just begin with you. Yeah. You, our listener, you.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That like coming back to the fact that what does love feel like?
Yes.
And it may not always feel comfortable, but we are so for you. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to see in our communities, that we are for each other.
Yes.
And that we are brave enough to be able to hear things and feel things and share things that may not always be comfortable, but they could take us to that next step of what's in our highest good here.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. So thank you for another fabulous session. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in, whether you're just listening or whether you're with us in person. It's just, this is absolutely our heart's desire, is to come in and be with you and be for you. So thank you for being here with us too.
Yeah. Thank you.